Greetings shippers, welcome back, and it's time for another episode of Fic Rec Friday, the series where I give you a bunch of recs, mostly by me and some by you, thanks to all the wonderful recs you guys leave down below. This week it's back to the classic format, random fics. I just scrolled through the bookmarks on my phone at random, and where we landed, those are the fics we have. So because we're going to be talking about fics, we're of course going to do our disclaimer. You can expect to see a wide variety of recs here on this series, from dark fics, to overplayed tropes, to completely crackish fare, to rival pairings, to pretty much anything you can think of. So it must be reiterated that this is not a bashing space. There is no need to seek out reader, writer, wrecker for harassment. Different strokes for different folks. This series is all about sharing all that fandom has to offer, and not all of fandom is for everyone. Fandom can be fundom, but we do have to work to keep it that way. We don't all have to like the same things, but we can discuss it respectfully. Quick lickety-split as always so we can get right to the recs. But one last thing before we do that, if you haven't already, please do follow on social media to stay up to date, know when we're streaming, and just come on over and chit-chat about fandom. It's a good time, I swear. And now, let's get to the fics. Fic 1. Trigger warning right off the bat. We're going into the low-key dark area. Kinda dark, but not really. Although, depending upon what fare you usually deal with, this could be extremely dark for you. This fic is partially a rape fic and a rape recovery fic, as well as a getting together fic of a separate couple. And it's gonna take us over to a couple we have not discussed before on this channel. Hopefully one day we will. It's Wrightworth, the pairing of Phoenix Wright and Miles Edgeworth. And yes, I'm using their localized names. This fic is called Peppermint Leaves by Ace Clavier Gavin. One chapter, word count 4,143. This fic takes us to a Miles Edgeworth who's just starting off his prosecuting career. He's really just starting to build a name for himself and building his confidence, and he's still dealing with all of those self-esteem issues that we know plague him throughout so much of the series. That is until Wright comes along to fix all of it, but more on that later. This fic deals with him being assaulted very early on in his career by a prominent client, and the rest of the fic follows how he deals with that, or rather doesn't deal with it, as it's not really something he can fully process until he encounters his assailant again and has no choice. This all deals with him confiding in Wright and how that affects their budding relationship. It's just very well written. The author chose to focus on the recovery aspect of the fic rather than the assault itself, so that is very brief, but the effect it has on Miles and the rest of the fic is very well executed. If you want a deep dive and exploration of these feelings of repression, of recovery, of slowly coming into oneself again, this is a great fic to check out. It also doesn't require a lot of knowledge of the Ace Attorney series at all. If you have knowledge, it helps, especially because the characters chosen for each part make sense. However, if you know nothing, you can still get into this fic. Also, this pairing is big. It has so many other works, so if you're just intrigued by the pairing itself and you're not into this kind of theme, well, there are many other works out there for you. Next up, we're going to a smutty realm. It's just that kind of week. Just scrolled right to the smut. And we're going to the supernatural fandom. But it is not Destiel and it's not Wincest, because of course it's not. We're going back to the realm of Cass and Crowley. It's been a while. This fic is called How to Human by the Fierce Beast. One chapter, word count 3,639. This is a kinky fic. It's about Crowley being really into Cass when he was human. This is a post-season 9 fic, so Cass is back to being angelic, but Crowley's not over what he was like when he was human. He's just really drawn to the idea that he was so weak, so flawed, and yet still had that angelic core, not to mention that little addiction to human blood. Also, Cass happens to have a higher opinion of Crowley than he does of himself, and all of this leads to Crowley summoning him, and it just goes down a very smutty path. It's got some introspection though, and it really plays with its themes well. It's more than a PWP, although there is a lot of P. This one is short, to the point, but it can be a good gateway for this couple if you're intrigued as to how it would work. It's a smaller pair in the supernatural fandom, but there's some interesting stuff there, especially if you like angel and demon dynamics. It's definitely not on the level of Good Omens, but there's a lot of stuff there to work with. Next up for our third fic, we're going to be dealing with some tropes. Oh, some beautiful, glorious tropes. This fic is called Complementary by Mythin. One chapter, word count 5,391. This is a Superbat fic, and a Superbat fic that has situated itself firmly inside the comics verse. And this is the older comics universe. It's not New 52, and it's definitely not Rebirth. It is pre all of that. So, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with a space mission gone wrong. Batman and Superman are stranded on a planet, which shouldn't be a problem. I mean, you've got Superman with you. However, this planet has a red sun. So of course that means that Clark's down for the count. He is essentially useless. So not only does Batman have to do pretty much everything, but Superman is sick and injured, so he has to take care of him as well. So we've got so many tropes. We've got the character with a fever love confessions trope, we've got stranded on a planet together, and of course we've got having to spend the night in a cave. I'm telling you, spending the night in a cave, it is underrated. There's a whole subset of fics about spending a night in a cave specifically. Depending upon the fandom, a car or a cabin need not apply. So if you're a sucker for love confessions and characters being completely removed from all of their other casts to make them happen, well, this is a fic for you. Stranded on a planet with a red sun. Come on. You know, a lot of you have thought of this exact same scenario. It's a good one. Next, we're going to visit a controversial ship, and it's still controversial at the time of this recording. We're going to be looking at a Reylo fic, an early Reylo fic that was written very shortly after The Last Jedi's release. And during that period, it was just when Reylo was starting to take off yet again thanks to the legitimacy granted to it by that film. And because of the themes and plot of that movie, you had a lot of fics revolving around, of course, their telepathic force bond. And this is one of those fics. This fic is called Juve of Evil dans mes rêves by Regina Halliwell. The translated title is I Want to Live in My Dreams. It's one chapter, word count 2073. This deals with the idea that the two were connecting a lot more than was shown in the film. It's a mid-film fic, so a bit of a missing scene, but also an AU because it did not go down this way. This fic deals with the idea that the two share a special understanding and that they can only really let their guards down with each other, and that when they do let their guards down, it ends up strengthening their bond and connection. And so a lot of the times they're connecting in their dreams. When the two need to sleep, they can't really keep the barriers up and they're just being drawn to each other. This fic is about how the two of them handle that and how they eventually give into it because really they don't want to fight anymore. And in this space in between them, away from everybody else, they can have this. It's just a fic full of so much longing. It's a short one, but it really infuses itself full of so much feeling. There are some people who are just completely against this ship and they don't want to give anything surrounding it a second glance, but if you are curious as to what people are working with, this is a good entry point. Because like any ship, there are many different ways to take it, and part of the beauty of fandom is the multiple reads and interpretations. So if this sounds like it's for you, then you know the drill. Check it out. And finally, on my trip through my phone, I found a fic that I completely forgot I saved, and it was glorious. It was one of those beautiful eureka moments when you remember exactly why you saved something, and it's just, yes, this fic. Forever. This is Virus by Martina Jarrett and Orange Blossom. Potentially they're the same person. It's a bit of a complicated tag, but that's all right. One chapter, word count 6,275. So for this, we need a little bit of history from Star Trek TNG Season 1, the maligned season that, while not great, does have a couple of really solid episodes and lays some good groundwork. It's popular to just universally hate on it, but there's something salvageable there. I'm not just saying that because I'm a massive Trekkie. In the second episode of The Next Generation, someone decided that it would be a fantastic idea to recreate a Season 1 episode of TOS, which was The Naked Time. An episode where really poor away team practices led to the crew being infected with a virus that simulated drunkenness or removal of their inhibitions. So you got to see all kinds of things. Spock crying in the briefing room, and Kirk slapping him when he tells them what good friends they are.
When I feel friendship for you, I'm ashamed. You've got to hear me!
Chapel throwing herself at Spock, Sulu fencing in the hallways, it's a classic.
We see you at last. Sulu, put the...
This episode also occurred very early in the series' first season. However, it was both better received at the time and retroactively. And also, television was different in the 60s. It was already highly episodic in nature. While it still was in the 80s, things were beginning to shift, and the expectations of how much one was meant to know about a character were also changing. And so was what was acceptable when it came to tropes. Some things that had previously been commonplace were now beginning to be viewed as cliched or overplayed.
Beverly.
Yes, Jean-Luc.
You will address me as Captain.
Captain? Oh, well then, my dear Captain. You will address me as Chief Medical Officer or Doctor.
It's much easier to care about what happened in this episode in retrospect once you know more about the characters later on. It's actually better to watch it later in the season. However, all of that aside, in this episode, Chief of Security Tasha Yar seduces Data. That is one of the big takeaways from this episode, that she sleeps with Data. There's a decent amount of fondness in fandom for Tasha because of how she met her demise at her actress's request to go and try and pursue other opportunities. So the character was written off quite quickly, which meant that the relationship between her and Data never got to be fully explored, and they had kind of dropped it after that episode anyway. However, for certain members of fandom, they never dropped it. This fic deals with the aftermath of their coupling and how Tasha's been avoiding Data ever since. She's just not sure how to act, what to do, what to say, and it's particularly complicated because he doesn't really have feelings, except he oftentimes acts like he does, and she's just completely floundering. All of this comes to a head when the two are alone on a away mission and they're forced to spend the night on the planet, and all of a sudden, Data contracts a virus. He's there, he has amnesia, and she has to take care of him. Suddenly, he's completely reliant on her to tell him who he is, and she can say anything, including anything she wants about their relationship. It's a really sweet fic that really dives into Tasha's character and why she might be so afraid to get close to somebody, and also how much it means to Data to be treated just like a regular human. It is such a sweet, fluffy piece that also has that aura of tragedy in it because it's not an AU. It's taking place before her untimely death. So you know that at the end of everything, there is only sadness. But still, this is a beautiful moment that I, for one, wish had really happened. If you're interested in diving a bit more into the relationship between these two characters, definitely check this one out. Which brings us to our fan rec. I couldn't resist. It has one of my favorite tropes. This rec comes from Formica. This is a Winter Iron fic about the world becoming Groundhog Day, and only Tony and Bucky seem to realize it. Between trying everything they can to stop the loops, the two men slowly start to get to know each other and fall for each other. This fic really feels like a part of the MCU, and the writing is fantastic. You got me into Winter Iron, so you needed to see this gem. This is Nothing Changes Except You by S.S. Ahaz. One chapter, word count 12,905. That's right, the Groundhog Day time loop. Time loops can oftentimes just be called Groundhog Day fics because for many people, Groundhog Day is just the perfect example of how to do a time loop story well without it becoming stale or cliched or trite. And you know that it's a staple. It is just such a great way to introduce this little pocket of time where the character is forced to grow, but you don't really have to deal with any of the other characters. You can just focus your attention where you want to. It's also a cute dynamic when you bring more than one person into the time loop, as happens here. So you get to see them get closer and closer, and there's always the excitement in these tropey fics that you know that at the end, when the time loop ends, as it inevitably does, unless it's a really dark fic, then you're gonna have to deal with the other characters' reactions to these two's new relationship. So as you're reading, you can also be primed with that anticipation of, ooh, what are they gonna say? How are they gonna react? What's Steve gonna think? This fic is fantastic. It gives the two characters space to grow, space to deal with their issues, and it's also just such a fun read. If you want to enjoy a time loop or Groundhog Day fic, perhaps you haven't read this one, perhaps you've never checked out this trope, well, then give this one a look. That's all for this week. As always, thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to spend it discussing fics with me. I always appreciate it. Keep leaving your recs down below because they are fantastic. I love reading them, and I know the other commenters do as well. There are, as always, more videos coming soon, so if you haven't already, please do subscribe and hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid, because things are sporadic here. You're not really sure what's happening, except on Fridays, which is Fic Rec Friday. I will see you all again when I can, and until then, let's get to that outro. Bye-bye. This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Special thanks to all of my patrons, names on the side, for helping to make these videos possible. There are, as always, more videos coming soon, so until then, stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.